Saro, Rizzo, and I think one of the best and worst things I ever did was answering an email from Mandy about a year and a half ago. But she goes, can we meet and talk about offshore wind? So we had a cup of coffee, like she said, and the rest is history. But I know I'm doing the right thing because my wife doesn't complain about all the thousands of hours I've done. Yeah, so I live in Avila Beach. I've been there about 30 years. I'm an attorney since '92, and I have two young kids, a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old. And my wife's happy because my 11-year-old is becoming a young activist. He's the guy who holds up the big blue whale at all the events. Yeah, so a brief talk. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir because most of you are here. You already know about offshore wind, and it's such a big topic. And if you looked at our website, you see a lot of the good information we put out there that it will bring you up to, well, hopefully it's more than a primer. It'll bring you up to speed, and you can get really buried in the details because there's the economic implications, there's the political implications, there's the environmental implications, and it is a global movement to industrialize the oceans, and it's slowly becoming a global movement in opposition to it. Because from what we are finding out is, it's not, the reality is it's not what it's being sold. And we're kind of lucky in the sense that we get to see from what's already happening in England and more closely related to what's happening on the East Coast and contact with people. And you see that they're actually living with it in the process, and actually we seen as a month ago what happened off the coast of Nantucket with a big blade falling into the ocean. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But anyways, so I'm here supposed to talk to you about, and it's such a big talk, I'm just going to give you a cursory impact about offshore wind. As you all know, we're here in the epicenter of it, and just as it's beginning, and hopefully it won't come to fruition, but if it does, what is being proposed is the Morro Bay wind energy area. As you know, it's 370 square miles. It's about 240,000 acres out about 20 miles from here. Basically, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM, entered into a lease with three big corporations back in, I think it was December of 2022. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And the three companies, and they all got some greenwash names, Golden State Wind, Even Keeled Wind, and Atlas Wind. Two of them are foreign multi-billion-dollar corporations. And Even Keeled Wind is a hedge fund. No, it's Blackstone and some other. Anyways, these are big players. And they decided to come in and enter into these leases. And there's two more big leases off the coast of Humboldt. But when you talk about offshore wind, it's just not what's going to happen out there. And what's happening out there doesn't work unless a lot of stuff happens to happen on the land. And that is something a lot of people aren't aware about. So primarily what we're finding out right now, what we knew about, is the industrialization of our ports. Or when we think of the ports, we primarily think, as we're finding out now, is Port San Luis, because we have a huge breakwater out there, and also Morro Bay, which most of you are familiar with. And what needs to be done is, in order to support these offshore wind farms, three big companies out there, we're not big enough to build the actual structures. These things are about 900 feet tall, the turbines, and they're very, very big. And in fact, they haven't really figured out the technology, how to make these things float. Because you know, out here, the water where they plan to put them, unlike the East Coast, when you put them 20 miles out, the water is anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 feet deep. Right. So it's completely different than what they have. You go 15 miles off the East Coast and you're still 200 feet of water. So there they can actually sink them and ground them into the ground. You need to float, and they really don't know how it's going to do it, but they're all going gung-ho because the money, and they think, well, you know, this is this big untapped resource. Let's go for it here. Anyway, so build these big things. Most likely, they're looking at the port of Long Beach and Humboldt, and just to build the big facilities to build these things there that actually be assembled. And the plan is to by tugboats bring them all the way out to Morro Bay. So off the coast right here, and then they're going to tether them down or chain them down, basically. And you just look at the amount of chain. If you have 300 of these things, which is being planned, each one about 100 turbines. So they're planning about 300 of these with these 240,000 acres. This amount of chains I think is over 2,000 miles of chain. Jeez. So you just think about all that steel, 2,000, yeah. Yeah, but you figure 4 or 6 of them per 4,000 feet, and you start doing the math.
The links are huge. We saw photos of it. It's like as big as a car.
Yeah,
right?
each link. So imagine basically a chain almost across the United States. So we're going to dump that into the ocean, and there's not going to be any problems, they tell us. Right?
21 has to be 3 miles long.
Yeah, so you just add them up, you got 1,000 miles and probably other, anyways. So what do they need local industrialization? Because these turbines are out there and they're not as foolproof as you might think. You know, it's not like a solar panel you put on your roof and, you know, clean it up once in a while. These things need constant maintenance. And it's called the Pacific Ocean, but it's really not Pacific. If you spend any time out there, the water's rough, you got big waves, you got salt water, and they need a lot of maintenance. So the ships that they'll have to maintain them need to have a place to port and dock to bring people and supplies and fuel and all the extra things that are needed to maintain them. So they're thinking, well, there's a company now called CET, Clean Energy Terminals, which is a brand new company, and which is another funny thing because they came up and it's like, and Mandy asked them, you know, did you ask them? Yeah, you had a meeting with some of these people.
Yeah.
And they've never done this. They have a pretty little website up there. You know, they have a little picture, that's not the best one. But they come across like they're experts in this field. And when you really look into it, they've never built one before in their life. It's purely like some savvy business people said, there's a lot of money to be made in this industry. How can we make money on it? Let's get into the port business, the clean energy port business. Another greenwash name. Anyway, so they made a presentation. They entered into a small preliminary lease with the Port San Luis Harbor District, preliminary to do an exploration to decide if it's feasible to do it or not. They haven't approached, so that's one spot, and the other spot they're potentially looking at is Morro Bay or just north of Morro Bay.
Morro Bay.
Yeah, but from what we know is the ships that need to go out to service these are anywhere from 250 feet to 300 feet long. So it's a big ship. And by the way, they still need to build these ships because under the Jones Act, all these ships need to build in the United States. And we don't, so, and you just don't go down to the shipyard and order a 350-foot ship. That's another problem, yeah.
I've heard they'd have to dredge our harbor in Morro Bay like twice as wide and deeper, which disturbs all the micro.
Oh, without a doubt.
Do they also have to dredge Avila if they do it there?
I'm not familiar with what they do. There's a breakwater, but probably the question is in Avila they don't want to be very specific with what they have right now. Either they don't want to tell us to alarm us, but you start looking at where it could only be, right? So in Avila, we already have 3 big piers out there. 2 are old wooden ones, a Hartford pier, and then the one is Avila Beach itself, which is basically broken in. It serves a place to fish off and dive off of. Yeah, go ahead.
Not only have those ships not been built yet, but the people that will man them are not going to be trained more than just boat training. They're only going to be doing a lot of guesswork. So when they have problems, they're going to be in a real panic.
No, yeah, without a doubt. But so even, you know, you go along with it, you said, okay, well, what does a pier that goes out 1,000, 2,000 feet from Avila into the water, what does that mean? Or what does it look like? We don't have anything like that, so this would be a first time. But common sense dictates that you have an industrial pier out that goes out, and it's big enough for trucks to go down, fuel. So right off the bat, you think about pollution, noise pollution. 3 ships coming in 24/7, all the noise associated with ships coming in and out. Light pollution, because you have to have these things lighted. You go at nighttime, the port is kind of pretty scenic. Now you're gonna have lights, and air pollution, all the ships sitting there, docking, the trucks coming in. Water pollution, there's always stuff leaking into the water. So you name it, all 3 types of pollution, that's what it's gonna bring in. Oh, traffic. I live in Avila, there's only 1 road in and 1 road out.
Right.
You start talking about 100 people per ship, all the big trucks coming in and out. We're worried about traffic congestion on that road. It's a high fire hazard area, the whole Avila Valley right there. CAL FIRE is already on the record saying they don't believe any new development should happen for evacuation purposes in Avila Beach or in that whole Avila area. You're gonna need to have fuel storage, obviously, because these ships are coming in. You know, we fought for years. In fact, Mandy mentioned, one of the first lawsuits I did back in '96 was against Unical. I was fresh out of law school, and I didn't know what I was doing then. Anyways, I live in Avila, and I found out there's this issue of contamination, leaking underground pipelines, and I got involved in. And back then it was called, we put a group together called the Avila Alliance, and we sued Unical to clean up the beach because of the discussion, and we got it to EIRs anyways. So it became, at that time, the 2nd biggest environmental cleanup in the state of California.
Wow.
And yeah, so I was the first guy they say you're the first guy who threw the spear. But, so I know something about Avila Beach. I've been involved in issues and AVAC and whatnot. So I know the issues down there. So yeah, and you talk about fuel storage, we fought for years, and we finally, I don't know how long have you been here, but over Avila we used to have big tanks from Unical, and part of the cleanup is that those had to come down. So now the question is, all this fuel storage, where is that gonna be in Avila after all these years? Are we gonna bring it back? Basically, you're re-industrializing the port. And after Unical finally closed down operations, moved out, Avila emerged into what is nice, what you consider a tourist town. And the port itself, there's commercial fishing boat and recreational fishing, and a lot of people moor their boats out there. Andrew is the expert on that. But tourists come there, it's been written up by internationally, just like Cayucas is a tourist town, people go there to recreate. And then we also, and the use of the beach itself. So what we refer to right now is Port San Luis Beach. There's, people call it dog beach, but it's one of the few dog beaches you can go and walk your dog, unleashed, 24, pretty much open. And when you look at it, that's pretty much a spot where they'll have to put this pier down there with a big road, and it'll destroy that beach for all intents and purposes. And that, just like if they do something up here, north of Morro Bay, the same thing right there. It needs to go someplace, and even in Morro Bay, they're thinking about a landing for all the cables, electric cables that are associated with offshore wind. So it's gonna be bad for tourism. People don't go on a vacation to the Port of Oakland. They don't go to Long Beach. They don't go to St. Peter. But yeah, you know what I'm guessing. If you have your choice,
Stay away from
you're gonna stay away. I mean, you get oil, you got noise, you got traffic. Another thing we found out is they find out on the East Coast is property prices decline, believe it or not. There's studies that are at 5 or 6% because suddenly you have your house by the water, and now it's not this tranquil little place. You get the traffic. People don't want to see ships 24/7 out there, big ships, listening to them, the noise and the traffic and what. And then you have the visual blight itself. Like I said, looking at it, smelling it, hearing it, seeing it. Basically, and even Boehm talks about this in some of their literature out there, talking about the diminished quality of life in an industrial port. And this is what they're trying to sell us, and they're trying to tell us it's all going to be good. So those are, and just, you're all intelligent, think about what it means. The offshore impacts, I mean, what are the impacts? And we've been talking about that, and you have these 300 plus turbines out there. You have the obvious impacts to the to marine life, to the birds. When you think about this, is Mandy knows about this. The corridor for the Pacific Flyway, exactly. You have these things spinning at the other edge, is almost hundreds of miles an hour, and pick up any piece of literature on wind, and you'll see the effects, negative effects with birds. And the whales, we already know what's happening on the East Coast. The experts working for the government will tell you there's no connection whatsoever.
Right.
But even off here, we don't have it, but I think it's more than a coincidence just with the sound and the testing they need to do underwater. It's having an effect on marine life. I won't go into details, but I think you all know looking into it. And then what they're finding out on the East Coast too is you have all this increased traffic with the ships building the turbines themselves, but also the maintenance of it. And you don't need to be a genius to figure out if you have a lot more traffic on on the ocean, then you're gonna have a lot more strikes of marine life and whales and whatnot. So this is what it means. Light pollution, they're finding out off the coast of Nantucket, these turbines out there, even though they're far out, they need to have a red light on them for aircraft, right?
Yeah.
And so you think you're going to be at nighttime and you look at the sunset and you look at, that beautiful point, and then you're going to start seeing red lights up there. And they're built pretty strong because they need to let airplanes know they're there. So you will see them from 20, 25 miles out. So there goes your nighttime view when you're looking at the ocean. When you look to the west, that's what you're going to see. The power cables underground, not underground, on the ocean floor. Talking about, again, hundreds of miles of underground power cables. Sherry knows a lot about that. We have stuff online. The effects of the electromagnetic currents, what that does to the fish, and how it affects the fishermen, and what it's going to do to what's happening. We can see what's going on top of the water, but what goes on underneath, for obvious reasons, isn't always apparent, but we do know the negative effects of it. Then you'll need a substation. A substation is a big little basic factory out in the water to convert the power from AC to DC,
AC
right?
to DC,
Yes.
yeah.
And they're full of big, ugly chemicals, names, and pollutants and whatnot. And then, to finish up, we have the issue of say that once it's all there and it's built, right, our nightmare, it's out there, and then they say, no problem, it's all gonna be safe. Well, on July 13th, as I mentioned first, off the coast of Nantucket, they had one of these, 400-foot blade?
300.
Three of them, yeah, and one of them cracked in half. Turbine. Two of them. Fell into the ocean, and they're made out of fiberglass and styrofoam and all sorts of other fun stuff that's not biodegradable. It fell apart and it washed ashore because of currents. That's what happens, What floats out there eventually comes in. And devastating, they had to close the beaches for a week or almost 2 weeks. They're still finding stuff, pieces of resin and fiberglass, because it gets broken down more along on the shorelines. It's hurt their tourism. Oh, and the federal government stopped in and closed, and this is the first, Vineyard 1 was the name of it, and this was the first operational offshore wind turbine in the United States farm. And the federal government had to step in after 4 months of operation and completely shut it down, saying, hold on, we got a problem here, right? So it's not producing any electricity. They're trying to figure out what's going on. The lawsuits are going to mount. You just imagine.
I think one in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, we just imagine what's gonna happen now with all the class action lawsuits. If you're sitting in Nantucket, you got a restaurant, you have any kind of business, you're losing your tourism, that's what they're gonna do. The attorney's gonna come in, they're gonna sue, loss of revenue, just like what happens when you have an oil spill off the Gulf, and think about the worst case scenario. And they're thinking about 300 of those turbines out here. Now they're finding out they're saying it was a manufacturing defect.
Well,
So, and these things do fall apart, so imagine 300 of them. Well, not 300 of them, figure there's 300, and each one has 3. So now you got 900 blades out there. So even if you have a failure rate of 1%, just do the math. That means 3 of these things per year are gonna be breaking down, coming into here. They're either gonna end up in Moore Bay, Cayucas, Moonstone
Cambria.
Beach, Cambria, and that,
We're right in the line of
yeah,
fire.
and that's where it's gonna happen. So then what are they gonna say, right?
They have lubricant in them too.
And the lubricants and all the other garbage, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, when a turbine blows up, man.
So the question is, so worst case scenario, that's what we're looking at. And we already have the proof out there, it's happening now.
Right.
And the question is what we're doing is educating the public, because it's difficult to educate the current politicians we have right now, because they all drank the Kool-Aid. For whatever reasons, they're trying to go to higher office, or, that's where their support is. But thank God for people like you. You're waking up, you're showing up to the meetings, and the politicians are getting scared.
Yep.
Because they come across like they're the environmental gods, that they know better than you do.
Right.
And who are we to question their knowledge, what they know? I'm finding out that we know a lot more about than them. And
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna get into the economics of it, but I've been focusing on that, on my own private research. And if you have one question for any politicians, it goes, how much is this gonna cost us as the ratepayer? And none of them's gonna answer that question.
No.
So it's like building a house and hiring a contractor and saying, oh, let's go time and material, right? I don't know what you know what that means you don't got a contract price. You just keep going for it, and whatever it is, the state of California has already told them, we'll buy the strike price, whatever it's gonna cost, we're gonna buy it.
Wow.
And that's gonna be passed on to you. I was doing some research on some legislation that they passed. It's the Department of, Water Department, right? Yeah. Come on, right. And I was reading some other legislation on another issue, and inside I was reading and go, oh yeah, and by the way, all energy bought by the Department of Water Power is getting turned on to the California ratepayer. So right now they're looking at the wholesale price of a person who gives us, a doctor back in the East Coast, wrote a lot of papers, and he says, listen, it's hard to get the data, what it's gonna cost. But he goes, I'm looking at the wholesale price of being anywhere from 7 to 10 times more expensive than what the regular whole price is right here. So the politicians can't tell you what a straight face what it's gonna cost. They know it's gonna be expensive, but that's the thing that they don't wanna talk about. And so I just asked them, I go, it's us paying for it, why should we go for something for all the other reasons that you can't even tell us what it's gonna cost? Anyways, thank you for being here. Any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
You're from Avila.
Yes.
What kind of response are you getting over there? I was at the port meeting.
People in Avila are finding out about it, and they're upset, and we plan on probably doing a rally at the Civic Center, place where my old stopping grounds, when we used to do the Unical informational meetings, hopefully at the beginning of the year. I think maybe February, January, February sometime. I know the residents there are getting informed, they don't like it, especially a lot of the people there are, have their dogs, their pooches, they like it. And when you hear that impact, what it's gonna have, they're very, very upset. And our local supervisors get a little perturbed, yeah, anyway, so. But, you guys in Morro Bay doing a great job. Like I said, it takes a union of everybody together to fight this. It's gonna be a long battle. But things are happening, because what we heard earlier on from one, used to be called Equinor, now it's called Atlas Wind. Yeah, they changed names like my kids changed their pajamas, yeah, basically. It's like they have these meetings and they figure out what's the best name. But anyway, so Equinor, we found out that they said one thing that they really look at and they really hate is when they don't have public buy-in. But being here, at first when we got together, people didn't think of anything. Now we're being heard, and we're being heard very loudly. And something positive happened the other day on the West Coast. Bohm, I think it was 2 weeks ago, they had a lease for a big lease area off the coast of Washington State. And it's like, was it Washington?
Oregon.
And they had no takers.
There's only one.
Yeah, I heard in Washington there was no one bid.
Well, they didn't do Washington because
Because they found out in Oregon that usually people are sitting there, these big corporations are chomping at the bit to sit there and put a bid in, they think they're gonna make this money. They're already shying away, they're seeing the problems, they're seeing the public opposition, they're knowing the costs or overruns are going like that. It's already kind of withering, up there, but we need to keep it up. Don't let that give an indication to like hold off the gas. We need to go full bore.
Keep it to the floor.
You already talked about the fact that we don't know the ultimate cost is time and material, which is always a bad thing. But we haven't been privy to the negotiations from the moment of inception of this. It was all done behind closed doors in the 11th hour, in our case, of the last administration of our council. And there's so many things in leases that they've been given that we have no idea about, that we should be given transparency about. The length of the lease that they've been given, I have no idea what it is. If the whole thing doesn't work out and they have to do something else, do they still have those hundreds of thousands of acres to have their way with? And, it goes on. There's a myriad of things that we don't know. And I would like that in itself to be an issue, and people don't talk about it very much. Do you have any suggestions on how to mitigate that?
Yeah, like I said earlier, beginning, there's so many different facets to this whole huge industry, and you look at the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, they're the ones that give the leases, and there's all sorts of problems with those leases. What are they gonna do when they're all over? Are they even gonna pay to take these things down? Is there gonna be enough money to take them down? What happens? Oh yeah, the other thing is, most of the costs of this projects, like the port infrastructure and all that stuff, that's the taxpayer's gonna pay for them in California.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So when I talk about a $5 billion port in Long Beach, or $6 billion, that's gonna come from the taxpayer. California right now is, they want us to pay for everything and be guaranteed a profit. And that's basically the way it's written, because the politicians have all gone for that deal because it's so important under the guise of saving, Mother Earth, that
It's greenwashing.
they're basically let them do whatever. So they're guaranteed a profit is what's going on.
That's right.
All right, I need to go, but I know we got a cake over there, and
Has anyone addressed the fact that storms are getting worse because of climate change? And that's like a whole wild card right there. Like really bad biblical proportion storm comes through and we just start dealing with shrapnel.
well, that's the thing is, we know is, we here they call them, the Pineapple Express. We get some pretty bad storms that they come through right here, and they really don't know what, you have something 1,000, 900 feet tall in the air, floating out there 20 miles out. The waves can get pretty big, and these things are going to be bobbing around there for 30 years. And they tell us, "Don't worry, it's all figured out." And we go, "Well, how can it be all figured out when you don't even know what they're going to look like?"
You guys, it's just that I can let you know,